If I have everybody's attention, we'll get started. So this is a special meeting of Dearborn County Board of Commissioners and Dearborn County Council as requested by the Lawrenceburg Conservancy District. Tim, can you hear us?
I can hear you guys. You got me?
Yep, we got you. All right, so we got a good crowd here tonight, and then I guess if you guys are good with it, I'll turn it over to the LCD representatives to present to everybody. Thank you.
First off, I want to thank you guys for giving us your time. This is important to us. I know your time is valuable. The one thing I want to stress tonight is we want to hear questions. We really want to hear questions. If you think they're hard questions, ask them. We're here. We want everybody's mind. Everybody, I think, knows why we're here. We're here because we need a resolution. We need sharing of $4.2 million. We have that from Lawrenceburg. We have that from Greendale. We have that commitment from the Conservancy District. And what I brought with me tonight is Jennifer Ray is the group that we hired. She's in charge of chasing this grant. Andrew Birmingham is also with JMT, and he's been part of the work that's been done on the engineering of the Greendale levee system. And Mundell and Associates is John Mundell, Luke Johnstone, and they've been in charge of the engineering on the Lawrenceburg levee system. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to ask Jennifer to start it off and give you a presentation, and I've got that laying in front of you so you can see it real good, and we'll let her take over here.
Thank you so much. And as I'm going through this, feel free to stop me to ask questions on any particular slide. This is not formal. This is really just wanting to share this information, understand the need, and want to make sure that everybody has the information that they need to be able to really have your questions addressed in advance. So just starting off with this, how we are functioning here, and I'll move off to the side. As many of you already know, Lawrenceburg Conservancy District's primary responsibility really includes protection of public safety, just making sure the general welfare of the area is protected by the Lawrenceburg and Greendale levee systems are maintained, they're taken care of. So it's maintenance and operations. So that's something very significant when we get further into this presentation. The LCD is here for the maintenance and operation of these two levees that are protecting core assets for the county. For JMT, we're supporting, as you already heard, with the Greendale System Engineering and Studies and Grant Funding Plan, and with Mundell supporting with the Lawrenceburg system on the engineering and studies. I just wanted to do a little bit more. You might be asking yourself, for those who haven't already seen me present to the city of Lawrenceburg and to LTD, but why am I here? Why am I the one who's presenting? Why am I the one who's chasing the money for this? What qualifies me to do that? Because I would be asking that same question if I were in your seats. About JMT, we are 100% employee owned. We have actually at this point now over 2,800 employee owners. We have 50 plus grant writers that cover all of the disciplines, and I lead those grant services as well. We do bring creativity, innovation, passion, commitment to our clients and our stakeholders, and we really believe in giving back to the communities that we are in, and doing that with innovation, with inclusion, and with making sure that all of our employee owners feel a part of the process. With our grant experience and our success, we look at grants in 3 different ways. So it's not just can we apply for a grant, can we identify it? And part of what we're doing right now with the LCD is a grant research and tracking. So understanding what are all of the grant opportunities out there, and that's very critical at this juncture. As many are aware, the grants have changed drastically since last January based on the current administration. And so understanding all the different opportunities that are out there. So that's something that we do, of course, the grant writing and grant administration. And we have over $750 million approved within the last 7 years alone, including some grants that are, I wrote one person that was awarded for $120 million. So a little bit about myself. I have over 26 years of experience. I have a degree in engineering, a certification in planning. I lead our grant services. I've been involved in all aspects of it, the public engagement, facilitation, implementation planning, the funding planning, the project management. So it is very important to me personally, and when I look at grants and working on grants, I always look at what's the success rate for them, and do I think that it has a great project for a grant. And the reason I share that with you is I don't take on ones that I think are not going to be able to be funded. So I look at this, that this has all the potential to have those grant funds available for it. So why now? Why are we coming now? We know that these levy systems have had provisional accreditation for quite some time, in fact 15, 16 years now. Well, the reality is FEMA Region 5 has reinitiated the update for the analysis and mapping plan for Lawrenceburg, Greendale, and look at it as a combined project. It's called LAMP, the LAMP project. With that, they then identify what's going to happen, what happens with that provisional accreditation that's currently under, and does that stay? There are, if the final design and construction might not be funded, completed in time for the full accreditation process, and so looking at funds for that as well. There's major economic impacts for Dearborn County, for the entire county, the city of Lawrenceburg, the city of Greendale, being the county seat here, and potential risks to assets and quality of life if this is not funded, if this is not fully accredited. And then also to garner letters of support from community members. All of these are long lead items, so that's the urgency of starting now, of securing everything that we can possibly secure in the moment as we continue to seek out various opportunities. So wanted to just share a map, the area under flood protection from the levee system. So everything you see here in the yellow boundary within Lawrenceburg and Greendale is what's covered by those levees for flood protection. So just wanted to share that in the levee district, Greendale levee sub-district, pretty much where we're sitting right now, and a lot of the area around us. So we looked at this, there's a number of things that we've been working on, including what are those critical facilities that are at risk from a breach or failure. And so just really want to note, for Dearborn County, it's courthouse, county municipal offices. I want to kind of point out here, sheriff, county emergency management. For city of Lawrenceburg, police, fire, and rescue. Lawrenceburg Community School Corporation, all of the schools, which tend to also be areas where people go and stage if you have emergency situations. And then of course LCD, the LCD main office. These are locations that, should there be an emergency, are the areas that need to be able to be used and are not able to because they're most at risk. So LCD certainly, because if there's a breach, to understand what's going on, and all of the other emergency services. So it's just something to be aware of the critical facilities at risk. But also want to share what that economic impact looks like. And the source of this information does come from the National Structure Inventory dated 2023, so that's where those dollar numbers are coming from. But there's an economic impact of $890 million to Dearborn County. A loss of that, and that's with the breach system. So what if it's not breach? What if it's just a loss of accreditation? And that's really a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, because we're not looking at that catastrophic event. What we're looking at is what does it take to keep this accredited? And that loss of accreditation would result in a major economic impact to the residents in Dearborn County, because what that really means is that they're no longer within this area where they don't have to, they're not required to have the flood insurance, and that's that's what that provisional accreditation and that accreditation allows. It also means that a lot of the development that is looking to come here, that's coming here, that wants to invest here, that gets monies and dollars for the cities as well as the county, they won't come here because they're not going to develop in an area where they're forced to purchase that level of flood insurance. So looking at all of these, and you'll see we had about 2 years ago, now a year and a half ago, we had a charrette with a lot of individuals coming together, community members were able to come out, the LCD came out, and we presented this information of what does that total cost look like. So we have those in the $2024. We did run the inflation through 2028 to identify, here's what the costs are. This is final design and permitting, as well as the construction costs. So when you look at all of this together, we're looking at roughly, you say 67.7, reality we've been using the number of 70 million. And the reason for that is to make sure that we're having that conservative approach as we're looking at these funding opportunities and knowing there's always going to be a little bit more in there. So really $6.3 million for the total engineering and permitting to get everything to move forward, and then that construction being the 61.4. The 25% match we've talked about is between $16 and $17 million, and I'll talk about this local match here in a moment. When it comes to grant requirements, it really does not matter what type of grant you're going after, and I've gone after many over my career. There's certain things that are similar in all of them. There's always multiple funding sources that are available. All of them have different specific requirements. They have different commitments. They have different levels of local matches. The ideal is to find one grant opportunity that covers everything. When we started this process, that was a BRIC grant through FEMA. That is one of those grants that went away in the condition that it was. There's still funding opportunities available, and there's multiple funding sources available. But all of them have a specific schedule that's non-negotiable. What that really means is as soon as that grant is advertised, we tend to look at them and research them well in advance, but as soon as that grant is advertised, you need to have everything ready to go because it's generally not a long lead time. A lot of times they'll put out what's called a NOFO, Notice of Funding Opportunity. And for federal grants, that comes out, and you typically only have a few months, if that, to then submit. Which really says that grant research, getting everything in line, all of those long lead items you need to have in hand even before that notice of funding opportunity comes out to know that you will be competitive. There's generally some level of environmental documentation required, which just is to make sure that we're following all of the environmental laws that exist. And almost all of them require that local match. So if you look on that last slide, wrong way. If you look on that last slide where I say 25% match, the $16 to $17 million, that's that 25% or and greater. And that's all to be in hand before really even going after any of this. And you heard Paul talk about there's really the four entities that are all at risk with loss of accreditation: the city of Lawrenceburg, the city of Greendale, Lawrenceburg Conservancy District, and Dearborn County. And 3 of those 4 have already been able to come out and done presentations, they've passed resolutions, and they've committed to the $4.2 million. And that's really, as Paul said, that's why we're here tonight, to talk about what we need, what answers you need to be able to take some of those next steps. So at the time of application, everything has to be accounted for. And that's, again, with those local dollars, they need to be accounted for through resolutions. They need to be accounted for through line items. They don't need to be accounted for in one person's bank, so I'll just say that in advance, but they need to be accounted for in some variety of a binding resolution explicitly stating the dollars are set aside, or a budget line item knowing that they're set aside. There are also non-binding resolutions defined, so it's a motion adopted. It can simply be essentially what's necessary is a resolution to identify that, yes, these dollars are being accounted for to make up that 25% local match in order to be able to go after the grant dollars. There's a number of required documents. So the financial commitment, I'm gonna keep coming back to that because that's the crux of this, that for all local funds of 25%, the binding resolution from all entities contributing to that local match. We do want to share a few other items of the work that's been done, other potential fund resources, and this is where it really starts getting into some of that information of where else we can look for different funding opportunities. So we have been meeting with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We met with them on March 28th, pre-FEMA. I know through John and through others, there's consistent conversation and communication. But in this instance, we met specifically about, at that time, what was recommended was the brick. That's why I say this is the pre-FEMA press release. About 6 days later is where a press release came out, canceling the brick grant as we knew it. And they did acknowledge that, you know, with U.S. Army Corps of Engineers funds, because I know that's always a question that comes out. Doesn't the Army Corps have funding mechanisms? Don't they have grant programs as well? And yes, they do, but they acknowledge that it can only be used on U.S. Army Corps of Engineer projects. Well, these two levy systems, or the levy system, the two different levies are not both Army Corps of Engineer projects. And they really are dependent on each other as we're looking at what that lamp that I mentioned earlier with the mapping and the flood mapping looks like. So yes, there are some opportunities here. It doesn't cover everything. But they really recommend, I'm sorry.
You said that both of them were not. That implies that one maybe is one.
One is the Lawrenceburg levy is owned by the Army Corps of Engineers. Yes.
You have a Army Corps of Engineers is our boss. They're not owned by, we're the owners, we're the sponsors,
Yes.
City of Lawrenceburg and Conservancy. And the Army Corps of Engineers does not recognize the Greendale levy. It is a FEMA levy.
So is one of them owned by the Corps or not?
No.
My apologies on that. I'm just used to looking at who has to accredit, make sure the accreditation is in place for everything. Thank you, Paul.
What's the difference in, when they were put in? Were they put in at the same time?
Oh, no. You were put in after the 1937 flood, so it was completed, I think, in 1944. And the Greendale levee was built in 2000 in that vicinity right there.
That's where all your dirt from your soccer fields come from down there.
Is that why they're under two different things?
It's more of a reason that the Corps of Engineer levy is a 500-year protection levy. The Greendale levy is a 100-year protection. That's about 12, 13 feet of difference.
So again, going back with the Army Corps of Engineers, when we met with them, they really did recommend looking at opportunities for funding outside of the Army Corps of Engineers. They did mention a few different projects, a few different programs between the Silver Jackets program and the Water Resources Development Act, otherwise known as WRDA. However, both of these are only for certain aspects. So the Silver Jackets program is really to help with outreach. It's individuals who help with outreach. It does not help with funding. Likewise, the WRDA program is for pumps and pumping stations only, and so funding is available, but the funding's already been committed several years out, beyond even when we met with them at that time. And while there's pumping stations as part of these systems, it's a small part in comparison to everything else that's needed. And again, it would be one component of a large project. And as we were shared, as they shared with us then, even to be able to get onto that list of funding, we're looking at several years out, and there's already another wait list of projects before we would even be on that list. So the slide that you do not have in your packet, because this just happened recently, September 21st, so looking at last week, is we did meet with Congresswoman Hutchins' office, and we discussed the updates about the community project funding. And so this community project funding is something else, it's another opportunity. It does go through Washington DC, and we've looked at that previously as well. Now there's opportunities there. What was shared with us during this meeting is some of the funding that has been approved, because they've been able to move forward with approvals of other projects that were already in there. They're looking between $1.5 to $2 million. So again, it's a piece of the puzzle. It is not the $70 million that the entire project process needs, but it is a piece of the puzzle. And they also acknowledge their support of the levy project as a priority. So additional status, as I've already mentioned with the BRIC grant, it was previously identified that the BRIC grant was the optimal opportunity. It was one grant that would cover this. It's a pre-hazardous grant, and then that was canceled through an executive order on April 4th, 2025. That date will forever be etched, because it truly was like a week after we met with the Corps. But there are still additional grant opportunities. I'm continuing, and my team is continuing to do research, such as the community project funding. There's other grant opportunities that are constantly coming up, and there's still a little bit of unknown of what's going to happen next for pre-hazard mitigation funding as well. But that there will be things out there for it. So the most robust grant programs within this do require that 25% local match. So a lot of it keeps coming back to that local match. Now, here's the reality. With or without a grant, the project needs, the cost, they remain regardless of what type of grant there is, regardless of if there is a grant. So obviously, for the funding purposes, we're looking through all of the grants, but that project need exists. Talked about with hazard mitigation, so this is consistent with, as you mentioned before, that term notice of funding opportunity, NOFO, for pre-disaster mitigation grants. It is something that's required. It has been completed. Not everybody has yet approved it, but it has been completed and is moving forward through the process. So when we look at this grant requirements checklist, and I said right off the bat, what's really, really critical is when those NOFOs come out, we need to be ready to package everything together and be able to submit it as soon as possible. To make sure it's competitive and to make sure that we are not missing that window of opportunity. So we need to have all of these things completed. You can see with the identify the commitment of 25% local match, we've got that nearly complete. Update the Dearborn County multi-hazard mitigation plan, that's complete. LCD has adopted the plan, and then next up is for Lawrenceburg and Greendale to adopt the plan. In addition, on those checklists, we need to complete the benefit cost analysis, and that's in progress. And the work that's been done on that, that's basically saying, how much is this going to cost and what's the benefit? And is the benefit more than the cost? And with that analysis to date, we've identified, yes, that benefit is greater than what that cost is. We've also been going through and obtaining letters of support and resolutions from individuals, and you can see just a list of some of these individuals, some of the major employment centers, 152 individual letters from constituents from the freeholders throughout the area. And then also, and as I say that, I know Paul has gone out and talked to a lot of people about what this project is, and there's a lot of individuals that very much want to see this, because if the accreditation is lost, again, that flood insurance is what will become a requirement instead of something that's currently not necessary in the same manner. And then, of course, complete grant applications as a future item. So the next step, if you haven't figured out yet from everything I've said, is 25% local match many times over. It is really to identify how we complete that 25% local match package with looking at Dearborn County, with the impact that's happening for Dearborn County as a whole, the economic development impacts, that letter of resolution is something something that can be put forward, that can be passed, and that any additional help in obtaining additional letters of support can be given as well. I know it was a lot of information in a relatively short period of time, so I want to make sure that there's time now, ample opportunities. Paul said, please ask the hard questions. Ask the questions so that at the time the county is ready to move forward and discuss a resolution, the answers are already there and provided for you.
The one thing I wanna make clear is we didn't come here tonight expecting you guys to vote on this tonight. However, the importance of knowing something from you guys, it's important we know that in a real timely fashion, because we've actually already had one opportunity slip by us because we weren't prepared. So the way we're looking at this is we don't have any time to waste. We're trying to get this all wrapped up. And while I'm saying that, I noticed I got people from Greendale and Lawrenceburg Council and Greendale here. Please get these hazard mitigation adoption, that policy in if you can. It looks like the county might have already did it, but I've been working with Jason Sullivan on this, and we're needing everybody to adopt that hazard mitigation, because we can't apply for a grant without that either. So if you get a chance, Vince and Lenny, bring this up, and let's make sure that Lawrenceburg and Greendale adopt that hazard mitigation. And Jason, I think, has probably already tried to get a hold of or sent some information. Any questions?
Yeah, how many municipalities or organizations will be applying for this grant? And how many will be awarded? And what's our chances? That's 3 questions, I'm sorry.
It's under the grant umbrella, so I'll take that as one. There is not, I can tell you specifically, the GRIP program as it existed, what that was, and at that time, there were 380 approximately that would award in any given year, and they were awarding anywhere between 30 to 40 based on which year, and I had done an entire spreadsheet of looking at the last several years. There is, given the factors that exist here, there is a really good, very competitive. So the grant program is competitive, but this grant application for this levy system proves to be very competitive. It's got the quality of life, it's got the hazard mitigation, it has the economic development. There are major factors that are hitting all those boxes and checking all those boxes. And the sheer amount of support through the letters that, and the slide I just had, and you can scroll back to it. The sheer amount of support from the major employers and the community at large, that really helps. And the fact that it would be with a signed resolution from the county, it would be the 4 entities that are basically more or less in charge of the area, for lack of better terms, that would all be working together, helps push that competitive nature forward as well. I can never give you a 100% guarantee on a grant program, because there are no 100% guarantees for any kind of funding coming from anywhere else but your own pocket. But I can say that was on the BRIC grant. There are other grant programs out there where, again, this is very competitive, and that's also why this is not just, you see that the meeting earlier, we're meeting with Congresswoman's staff, we're meeting with other representatives, because grants are, it's needed for the community to support them, it's needed for the local government to support them, which comes through resolutions and dollars on that local match, but it's also needing as much political support as possible, because in the end, all the funds do come through some type of government agency, so having that support as well, which is why it's very important to note that we do have the support.
The one thing I'd like to say is Mr. Perlenberg's been a big help. He's gotten Aaron Housen's office very interested in this project. So I want to give out thanks to Mike on that. And anything that you guys could do to help us with any contacts you might have, we'd appreciate it, because we really need to reach out to whoever we can reach out to. We need that political support.
How does it affect the cost of flood insurance?
What's the effect of the cost of the flood insurance?
I can give you an example on my house. I asked them what flood insurance would cost me now, and it was about $2,800 a year. However, we're protected now. And the answer was, if we get decertified, they have no idea what the cost would be, but he would imagine it would be somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000 for my house. So it's a large amount when you're decertified. Large amount. And my house is probably worth $400, $350, $400.
How long will, if it gets fixed, how long will it stay certified? How many years?
They're in the process of determining that and thinking about it if we get certified, whether, ideally, it's 10 years. However, the one thing I want you to realize is we're looking at a $70 million project now, but 10 years from now, we're not looking at a $70 million project. Yeah, we're definitely, this project would take care of us. The Lawrenceburg levee relief wells are 85 years old.
That's right.
All right, so the relief wells that we put in, and Luke and John can correct me here, but I would hope we'd get 50 to 85 to 100 years out of them again. So that $70 million cost is not gonna come up every 10 years. I don't know if we do our maintenance and things on this. I mean, we're always gonna have cost to maintain it, but this right here is just an overwhelming situation that we're in.
You know, those 170 relief wells, we're not gonna replace all of them, we're probably gonna replace one out of every 2 or 3. And so, but then those will be good for decades, all right? And then we've got some other things we have to do, but once, with the levee to improve it, but once we do those again are decades long, they'll be good for as long as you maintain it every year like you're doing now, they'll be good for a long time.
So there was, early on, you made the comment with LCD's responsibility is maintenance and operation. And I said that very critically because as you look at it, this is a major capital project. This is not a maintenance and operation. It's not a lack of maintenance. It's just that there are things that happen. There are things that change in requirements. There's things that change in the climate. There is age that you can only maintain something for so long until you have to replace it. And so that's where this request is really coming from, is it's at that point on many of these systems, they've been maintained, they've been operating, they've been maintained for the life of it and probably beyond the realistic life cycle of it. And so that's where this is coming from the large dollars for this project. I also came back to this slide just to see, now these are government issued rates of inflation. So this is, the standard that they were issued for each year, the 2%, 2.7% on each of them. And you can see even from the 2024 cost estimate, $56.6 million to the 2028 of 61.4. And that's just over a few year period. So, you lose the accreditation or perhaps it's not lost immediately and this project keeps pushing out. The only thing that happens in that time is the amount of perhaps relief wells that are needed to support everything grows, the number of projects grows, but more importantly, the cost of labor and the cost of materials continues to go up. And that's what we've seen in the industry. So that's another reason for the push to make sure that all of this, one, the grant opportunities were ready to go for each of them, and that this work is able to get done sooner than later to really supersede the additional cost of inflation.
The other thing I'd like to touch on is since the money came to town, The LCD has put new floodgates in. We used to have what they called stop log floodgates, and it would probably take 30, 40 guys, probably a week and a half, 2 weeks to close this town down to keep it safe. Now, with the help of the utility companies, Greendale and Lawrenceburg, I can probably shut this down in 4 hours. So the LCD has done that. The LCD in all our past administrations, I've only been here since 2012, but since 2000, we've done a tremendous amount of work on our levee system with pump stations, floodgates, and John and Luke
Relief
just
wells.
slide up.
We found the relief wells because we hadn't been paying attention to them for a decade. So we found them, we rehabbed them, we cleaned them, we tested them, and those are old relief wells. And they aren't up to the kind of standards that we need now. So now they have to be replaced, or we'll spend way too much money maintaining them every few years, so.
And the other thing is all the studies that we've done, you know, these are studies that were made to do by FEMA and the Corps. It's not something that we were smart enough to say, hey, John, we need you to come down and do this. This was demanded of us, and we've spent a lot of time and a lot of effort, and John and Luke here can tell you a little bit about the studies, and Berm can tell you what we have tried to step up to the plate to get ready to know what project we have to do to get these levees certified. And we're so close right now to turning things in.
What portion of the levee is like levee work versus the relief wells, or what's out of spec right now that you're most intent on fixing?
Luke, I'll let you do this, you haven't spoken yet.
Yeah, so there's many different ways a levee could fail. There's many features to the levee here in Lawrenceburg alone. There's 18,000 feet of the levee. There's the 4 floodgates on the streets, let alone the 2 railroad floodgates. So yeah, there's many different ways of protecting the city, and there's many different ways of failure. Here in Lawrenceburg, one of the primary concerns with this levee is what we call seepage, but it's actually when that floodwater rises, the water can seep underneath the levee and just basically, you might think of it like washing out the foundations of the levee. So one of the ways to protect that levee from that failure mechanisms are these relief wells, which is a major piece of the Lawrenceburg project. And so these relief wells, typically they're right at like the toe of the levee, so on the dry side, right where at the bottom of the levee, and they're just put there, and they're put, you know, there's 173, and a lot of them are 60 to 80 feet down deep, and they're there kind of capturing that seepage water to lower that pressure so it doesn't wash out that foundation. Now, some of the newer Army Corps guidance has recognizing that it can be a problem not just at the toe, but a little bit further out. So sometimes they're a little bit beyond the toe. Even now, there's some relief wells kind of scattered in the city, a little bit further out. But that's where you'll find a lot of them.
And so those are like.
So is it like mass excavation that you're doing and stuff like that?
You could think of it like a well install, like for, you know, if you put in a pumping well like that, but there's no pump in it because it's just driven by the hydraulics of the system. But it's a well, and then you connect it to a storm drain, so it's the water, the river rises, the water gushes out of that well.
I remember like 15 or 20 years ago that company was down here grouting the holes and different things or whatever. They went all around the levee, pumping grout in there to I guess more or less seal out some of the seepage that would come through the levee.
Exactly.
So,
That seepage water. So these relief wells capture that seepage water, and you can direct it to the pump station, to the pond area, to also protect the foundations of the well.
so most of the money is going to be for these relief wells.
Out of your project, John, I would say, let's call it $27 million. The relief wells were what, 23, if I remember right?
Maybe a little bit.
A large portion.
A large portion of it, and the other item is also to address the seepage. It's just a different method because it's a more localized
So the Greendale levee, does that, I know there's a lot of relief wells in Lawrenceburg, there's none in Greendale.
Not in Greendale, so the improvements in Greendale recommendations, have to do with freeboard correction. There's a couple of low spots, you need 3 feet above the 100-year in the river, to the top of the levee to meet the FEMA, accreditation requirements, so that's a big one, projects. The other thing is just some general remediation for some slope stability and some seepage areas and some sinkhole formation that's happening, and coming up with a plan around some of those areas to really stabilize those recurring depressions. But the biggest one is the pump station. Actually relocating that pump station to the ponding area, the source of where the seepage is actually occurring and happening, as opposed to trying to drag that water all the way up to where it sits currently up on top of the hill up there by the highway, and actually locating that pump station directly adjacent to the ponding area, which also plays into the mapping that would occur and what the water levels in that area would look like after we get the projects incorporated. So those are like the 3 big 3 or 4 projects.
Are the plans complete for this job, or started yet, or?
Conceptual preliminary studies have been completed.
But this could fluctuate a lot dollar-wise then.
Yeah, there's been no engineering completed or permitting.
Whereas on the
Cost
Lawrenceburg,
estimates, though.
we are further along.
Yeah. The cost estimates that we have, you see the line item there for engineering permits, so we did break out what that cost would be, and we've included that in the overall amount. And that's where BRIC came in. We were hoping to be able to pursue that, and hopefully that the BRIC program or something like it comes back, because they accept those large dollar amounts that aren't necessarily shovel-ready. A lot of these grant opportunities, they want to see your project ready for construction. We still have a ways to go for Greendale to get there.
Well, and one thing, John, you and correct me if I'm wrong here, but before we finalize and draw a set of plans up, we need a blessing from FEMA and the Corps of Engineers that they're okay with our thought process.
That's right. You know, we've been, over the last several years, we've been kind of lockstep with the Corps, because they're really the ultimate technical reviewer of what we're gonna certify, and making sure that we're aligned with their thinking. So we've been in communication, we've been submitting reports, and this year we'll be submitting several more reports that kind of tee up the work that will happen, not this year, but perhaps begin if we get grants and we have our plan together, maybe in 2027.
Let me ask you this, with the Corps involved with this, have they been down here to check this out?
Yes.
To see what needs to be done?
They come and inspect very periodically. We just had the last inspection last year. Yeah, and so they've been here several times since we've been working on the project. They're familiar with our system. Technically, they also see the challenge. This is one of the most complex levee systems in the country. You're surrounded by water when the river comes up, right? Not many people sit inside that kind of big, bowl. And so these relief wells, there are more relief wells here than there are in most other communities in the country. So it's a complex situation. It requires special technical attention, and that's why we've been in communication with how to analyze this to make sure you're good for the 100-year flood, but not just that, the 500-year flood, as it was originally designed for. Because guess what? You may get one of those. 2018 we had the 20-year flood roughly. You saw some of that, some of you saw, especially in Greendale, extra seepage, etc. So this will take care of you. This is really what your kids, your grandkids, and your great-grandkids are gonna need to protect the community over the next 50 years at least.
The levee is the most important infrastructure that this town has. You don't need electric, you don't need sewer, you don't need water if this levee does not perform. You just don't need it. And we try to educate. We made a heck of an effort. Sometimes, I just get a little bit depressed because I don't feel like I get anywhere with the educational part of it and some of my conversations around town. It's amazing. And I grew about this levy until I got involved. And this levy is the heart and soul of this town. And we need to take care of it.
Are there other questions? Is there anything else that anyone feels they need, should this hopefully come to an agenda soon, for the resolution, that you would need information in order to be able to pursue that resolution?
Hey, I've got a question. What happens if you don't get a grant? Do we still gonna keep the $4 million we get from these guys?
So thank you for asking that. That's actually a question that has come up as we've talked with, the other agencies that are involved. So should the grant not happen, the projects need to happen at some point regardless. So that is something that's very important. Or, if you're facing, not even the levy failure, but then you're facing the lack of accreditation and the decertification, and it's, what you're facing then are people leaving because they can't afford in the same way to stay. You're facing the lack of incoming development. But if the grant's not, first of all, the LCD is not holding the dollars. I know that's come up as a question as well. The LCD does not hold the dollars. This resolution, the dollars stay with the city of Greendale, the city of Lawrenceburg, the LCD, the county, they stay there. As the grant comes in, as the matches are needed, that's when the dollars get paid out. So if there's not a grant, there's nothing to match against. The money's staying in your respective locations.
But it's encumbered and you can't do anything with it. So what's the grant, deadline?
Yeah.
The grant deadline is, there is not a specific one right now because there's not a specific grant out there. That's part of this process as well. Not knowing, we know that it's 25% match. We know, and that's just, grants have that local
So this
match.
could go on for a couple of years even?
It could, that is not the ideal, because the concern is the longer it goes on, the more likely and closer we're getting to a lack of accreditation happening. And so there will be opportunities coming up. There's still a lot of just concern and conversation when the BRIC grant went away. It was one of those that just got slashed out in those first executive orders that were coming through early in the administration. And it was because of the functionality of how the grant was coming together. There's still the need, and there's still discussion of the need of pre-hazard mitigation funding. And so that is still eminent. Historically with the BRIC grant and this type of funding, it came out roughly in October timeframe, September, October, November, when the NOFA, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, would come out, and that's when it's officially launched. And at that time, it coming out in October, they were wanting all of the information. This would be as a sub-grantor, this particular application, and that would have been needed by January for everyone to sign off on it. So that is not a lot of time when you look at everything that's needed, which is why, we were talking about earlier, we've gotten moving on the benefit cost analysis, all the resolutions, all the letters of support, the identification of local matches, the hazard mitigation plan being adopted by everybody, moving that forward as well. So I can't, unfortunately, I can't sit here and say there is BRIC 2.0 coming out. Everything I've been following in the various court cases, that many things have gone through the Supreme Court, as well as additional funding opportunities. There are different funding opportunities out there, and they'll be kind of any time during the calendar year too.
Question for the guys from Greendale and Lawrenceburg. You guys did binding resolutions. Did you guys do that during the budgeting process, or did you just do that just kind of out of a council meeting?
We did during the council meeting, but we did it through the help of redevelopment, because redevelopment has put a lot of effort and time in that area for Greendale.
Okay.
And,
They get the money too.
well, they have the money. Right. But as the county will notice someday, you guys will get that money when our TIF district expires here shortly. It's a lot of money.
Unless you renew.
What?
Unless you renew it.
We can't, it expires in 2030. It's gonna be about, one of them does, but that one will be,
That's a big one.
that'll be an additional $35 million that will be, come up, but, yeah, Greendale didn't have the money, so when I'm president of the redevelopment in Greendale, we decided to do it, and kind of the Mark's thing about encumbered, we don't have a lot of money on the redevelopment. I mean, our balance is at $3-4 million, maybe $5 right now. What we chose to do was we decided over the next, I think we did 4 years, we're trying within ourselves, and there's a couple of other GRC members here, we're budgeting $700,000 a year, and we aren't, honestly, we're earmarking that. Lack of a better term, we're putting it away. Be very honest, we've all been in public meetings, we're putting it in certificates of deposits and acting like it's not ours. But we have talked that all of a sudden, if a great TIF project comes up that we couldn't turn down, you know, would we use those funds? That'd be a decision for the redevelopment board. But at that point, we would probably just go beyond our commitment to the LCD.
Okay. Just a follow-up question there. One of the preferred methods was during a budget line item known to set aside, which is preferred, right? So that would be during the budgeting process, correct? Like our budgeting process.
That can, yes, that can be during your budgeting, the resolution is also.
But we know that if, you know, if we're able to, afford to do this. And finally, the non-binding resolution, you brought that up, so says we support this if we have the money to do it. Is that pretty much what the non-binding would be?
And actually, do you wanna speak to the non-binding? or-
Yeah, I can speak to it right now. I mean, you guys know this, and Andy's with me too. Unless you guys actually budget for that amount, you can't give it. I mean, that's part of the budget appropriations thing. And the board is well aware of that. And so what we're asking for is not a signed check for $4.2 million. We're just asking for your support that if we're able to get this grant, that you'd be willing to pitch in to help support this process. So, I mean, basically, we would ask you to appropriate it at that time, you know. Barring anything, if the county doesn't have it.
That would be my next question, because I ran into that situation before in a different town where we didn't have the money. The previous council had said that we did, well, we didn't, and they basically forced us to make it.
The rule is, you got it, you have to appropriate it, and so that's, I mean.
Yeah, we didn't have it, and they made us do it anyway. So, anyway, that was.
No problem, and we also have worked through, example resolutions, so that can be sent over as well, so nobody has to obviously make it right, as it needs to be, but the resolutions that have been signed, are all very similar in nature, and certainly pass that along through the call, pass that over, so that there's something to look at and react to, and see what has been already signed by others.
That would be helpful, thanks.
Absolutely. Any other questions? I know we had an individual on the phone, if you wanted to ask any questions, because with everyone talking here, it might have been hard to hear you.
It's Tim.
Tim, do you have anything?
Thank you.
Tim, are you sleeping?
Alright,
Sorry, I think we unmuted fast enough. I'm good at this time, thank you.
alright.
Hey, Paul. I think one of the things that needs to be super emphasized is having, Councilwoman Erin Houchin's, support. She's quite a dynamo. She can take, when she comes in a room, she owns the room, and I've met a handful of people in my 50 years that can do that. She is quite a dynamo, and she is, in my mind, been very supportive of this. I feel like she's working towards a resolution for us, so, I don't know, I just think that was kind of the selling point for me as far as Greendale. You know, this is a big fight for us, obviously you guys are aware of that, but just knowing if she was here, if she's in our corner, that helps so much, so.
When did we meet, Michael? I mean, that was last week, right?
September 21st.
No, that's
Oh, I'm sorry, Jay.
Yeah, we just,
I mean,
That'd be
that
January.
wasn't the first time. I mean, we went to, Mr. Curlyberg's office, me and Jimmy did one day, and then Jimmy's had phone calls, I think he ate lunch with him, so it's not just a one-time interest. I mean, she's really showed interest by sending him down, and any other politician that anybody might know could help us in this, you know, that we're trying to do here to help, we greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, I think it's important to note, and I don't know if you said this, Jen, or not, but we submitted pre-application information to Representative Pouch's office, so they have tons of 4 or 5 pages of detail about what we're after, a lot of stuff you've seen in the presentation here tonight, so she has that information as she's, out there, seeing what opportunities exist.
I can tell you something, folks. There hasn't been a project happen in this county that's this important since 1937. There just hasn't been. And the only thing that you could say that might come close to it might be that casino boat. But guess what? That casino boat would have never came here if we didn't have that levee. They just wouldn't have came. So keep that in mind. I mean, it's so important. It's important for the next 50 to 100 years. This isn't a 5-year decision. This is a long-term decision.
So is it fair to say that you're basically asking each entity for 25% of the 16 to 17 million?
Yes. That's what the 4.2 million represents.
Does that money, if everybody commits that money, does that money have to be spent before the grant money? Because you're basically pursuing $50 million grant, right? So if the job comes in at 60 million, would the entities that put the match in get some of their money back then?
It depends on the exact grant. Every grant does have slightly different qualifications. And that's where even with a notice of funding opportunity as it comes in, year by year, those do change. There's nuanced changes. Typically, it is a 25, and I say typically based on the grant, it's 25%, 75%, kind of going through the process. So that if the project only came to be, you know, the $40 million total, that's not gonna happen, but, I mean, maybe, who knows? But if it came to be only $40 million total, then it would be that 10 million of the local match, and then that would go back. Because a lot of times it is asked, put up your dollars put up your 25% to my 75% as we go through the process. Some of them allow you to go to certain milestones, and that it's at a milestone you're putting up the dollars. Some of them do, there are some that do ask for the local match first. So it does sometimes come that entire 25% is paid.
You mentioned you were successful getting a $125 million grant somewhere.
Yes.
Was that a brick grant?
That was not a brick grant, that was a transportation-based grant, and that was, it was hazard mitigation-based, but it was not through the brick grant program. So it was actually the bridge out to Hilton Head Island.
Are there any good grants out there that, I mean, that you think that the Conservancy District has a good chance of attaining right now?
There are several, but they are smaller than what brick would have been. So one of them being, and it is a much smaller one, but as Andrew mentioned, with the community project funding. So there's a very good chance with that, especially with the support from the Congresswoman's office. That's something that the pursuit of that is really looking at the engineering and permitting dollars to move that forward, so then it's ready with the shovel-ready plans to go forward on the others.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a cap on that program, but guidance I've seen is, last year they were up to 10 million. So that we're targeting engineering and permit for that opportunity, so that we get closer to shovel ready.
So the odds are there'll be multiple grants if we're
Yes.
lucky, right?
Correct.
My understanding was basically, you know, the city of Lawrenceburg was basically, if you don't get this whole 70 million or whatever, a grant for that, you know, my thought is, you know, say you do get the $10 million grant. Say you do get the $10 million grant, you know, basically, what's Lawrenceburg responsible for then? You know, I mean, basically, you start with the engineering costs and stuff like that, and also we have to give a certain percent. I mean, I was just understanding basically we're going after a $7 million grant.
We are going after the $70 million, but without a function like BRIC out there, it will be multiple grants, most likely, and then it will be for each of these, which will become the $70 million.
Yeah, it seems a little confusing. I mean, it's gonna be one of those things where we're dealing with cities, you gotta appropriate, you gotta budget money. Needless to say, we haven't budgeted or appropriated anything, we do have the money. I mean, we're very fortunate for the city of Lawrenceburg. But, yeah, I mean, I just don't think we have a whole game plan as far as, you know, how you're gonna obtain this money from each entity.
And we will make sure that everyone will have a communication prepared for each time that we do go after a grant so that people are aware. This was a pre-application to just get a good feel for, do we have that information? Because it's competitive, also at that time, these funds were still kind of being held up. That was the great news when we met last week, is there were so many commitments already made on other projects that were ahead of us. So that's why we wanted to get something in there to really show and highlight, hey, here's what this is. And you know, with anything else, grants are competitive, so it's just as much information as we can get in front of people as possible. As those actual applications are happening, that's when we will definitely make sure there's communication about that. What does that look like? What does that mean? How does that function?
So, let me get this, so just so I understand this. If we were to commit, do we have to pay it all at once, or can we pay it in installments? Like, we committed $1 million to the Cancer Center, we have to pay $250, over 4 years. It don't work like that, right? Is there a time frame?
I wasn't sure who you were pointing to on that.
No, we're all looking at you.
But do you think this whole thing can be done in 1 year? It won't be done in 1 year, obviously, and so.
When you say we gotta commit a line item, we can't just stick $4 million in there, I don't think. But we can maybe stick something in it this year, something in it next year, and carry it over from budget to budget.
Absolutely.
That's my question.
Absolutely, and that's what, as you were hearing, that's how others have done that as well. The idea is, let's say BRIC grant still existed exactly as it was before. They don't just hand $70 million over or their portion of it. It goes by process, it goes by milestone, there's a lot of paperwork that goes with it. Even once, and I shared this from a scheduling perspective, even once a grant is awarded, there's still about a year of work that has to be done until it's actually under contract, which says everybody's signed off, everybody's there. And even once that's completed, nobody's just handing the dollars over and saying, pay everything today. It really does come down to, as that work progresses, they're reimbursing at the same time of other things going on. It's also that what it's paying for is the engineering and permitting, which won't all be one giant bill at once. Paying for the contractor and construction. So again, this is not all one bill at once. So to that point, it's something that will be progressively billed out and progressively expected for payments out.
There's probably a lot of work to do around the interlocal agreements with each. You're just not gonna hand over $4.2 million. Jared, or your attorneys, we're gonna have interlocal agreements. Really, we need your support. And to me, the $4.2 million request seems easier than the request if we don't get the grant. What are we gonna request if we don't get the grant? And the land changes, there's gonna be a lot more discussion than the $4.2 million. I mean, you're looking at projects in the city of Lawrenceburg alone at $28 million. What happens if we don't get the grant?
So we have one question here, and then I wasn't sure if the two of you had any questions as well.
Well, my question is, if the entity's involved, if you don't get the grant from Houchin for that you're hoping to do the engineering and permitting, whatever, is there a benefit to use the committed money to start that process to get you closer to shovel ready? Do they count that as money spent? No, okay.
No, many of the grant programs will not count that. you there. So that's why we wanna get as many dollars as possible to count towards that local match.
Good question, though.
It is a great question.
That would make sense to me, but.
Yes. And I can share with you on the grant, the $120 million one someone asked about, fortunately, in that situation, there was additional right-of-way that was needed, additional property, and being able to contribute that counted towards a local match. In this situation, there's not really any additional right-of-way that's necessary to be able to count towards a local match, because that was one of the ways. And the other ways that in that particular situation, Dollar's Word came up with is, it's Hilton Head Island. For anyone who's been out there, there's lots of tourists, and they put a tourist tax on. And so they were able to get other people to basically pay for it.
Jennifer, can we go back to what, Mark said? First of all, I'm on the LCD board of directors. I wanna make it simple, the way I think it is. If we got a $10 million grant, and it was 75%, 25%, that means the match would be $2.5 million. That would be divided by the 4 entities, $625,000 apiece, is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you for offering that. I often get caught up in all of the aspects of it, so I appreciate that. And I hope that better answers the question. Are there other questions? Well, and certainly, through Paul, there's access to any other additional information that's needed for any of the engineering that's been completed so far on the levy system, for any of the grant dollars or grant approaches, so please do reach out and let us know. As I said, it's really critical for that last piece of the resolutions and then the hazard mitigation plan. So if there is a need for anything else, please let us know, because this is really, really important to the whole process. And so we want to be here to help in any way possible.
I just want to thank everybody for being here tonight, everybody in the audience and the support, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. So, unless anybody's got anything else. I'll let you guys bring it.
Thanks for dealing with the guy on the phone tonight. I appreciate you guys.
It's your meeting to close if you want to.
Yeah, I guess if somebody want to make a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second. Thanks, everybody.